Time for chat. Let's see what we got here. Oh, YouTube channels. Okay. So the question is, fuck, really blocking the camera. Sorry, I'm new to ever trying to stream on this phone. Any good YouTube channels similar to yours that deal with other philosophers? You know, I think it's just called Philosophy Overdose. Is a great channel. It's not really like mine. It's just like clips of philosophers and academics talking. Who else? Michael Sugru. That also is it's old lectures from the 80s, I think, when he was part of a great books program, or the Great Works or Great. I forget what the name of that lecture series was called. I have some of them. The name escapes me right now. But if you look up Michael Sugru, you'll find it. So he's an old man now, but he was a much younger guy back then. So that's pretty cool. Channels narrow down on a single philosopher and really explore his ideas in depth. Well, I mean, there's Weltgeist, but he's also doing Nietzsche. He does some. I mean, Weltgeist is in the same wheelhouse as me. So there's that. There's him. How is Nietzsche's will to power different from Kant's faculty of understanding? Kant's faculty of understanding versus Nietzsche's will to power. How are they similar? That's what are the similarities that you see that you would need to draw some sort of distinction between them? To me, they seem completely different things. I mean, will to power is not a faculty, for one. It's very hard to say what will to power quote unquote is in the absolute sense. I mean, really, it's an explanatory framework, but on the human psychological level, you could call it it's something it's an explanatory principle for our instincts and drives, which are unconscious and not subject to our individual reason. Our individual reason is subject to them, as a matter of fact. So, yeah. Okay, hold on. What did we see here? Vlog says great stuff. Thank you. What do you think of Schopenhauer's pessimism? Do you agree with this assessment that boredom and dissatisfaction is at the heart of everything we do? Uh, oh, you're saying will to power. Oh, so really quick on Schopenhauer, Schopenhauerian pessimism. Uh, I wouldn't say I agree. How would I put it? I want to say I'm like in the Nietzschean pessimism of strength category, but I've thought about it a lot more recently, and there's something like distinctly optimistic about Nietzsche that I think he himself would deny, and I kind of wonder if there's like an optimism of strength, and so that's just kind of like a personal note about me. Uh, but you know, like a non-theoretical optimism is what it would be, right? Like tragic optimism. Is that, can we talk? Can we have tragic optimism? Was that too contradictory? Um, so Schopenhauer's pessimism, boredom and dissatisfaction, like life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. Basically, is your wants not being fulfilled and your wants being fulfilled, and you being coming to eventually become dissatisfied. Um, I think Schopenhauer leaves out the obvious third thing in that there is the moment where you do have desires actually become satisfied. So where does that exist on the pendulum? I guess in the middle, right? There's the satisfaction equilibrium, and then you have pain and boredom on either side. That's sort of the Schopenhauerian view of the different ways, like where you are with a given desire. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think this is gonna sound like maybe a lame answer, but I think human desire is so complex and multifarious and subtle in so many ways and multi-layered and contradictory, and so much of it is unconscious. I don't feel comfortable in saying that Schopenhauer's premises there are sound. That that's actually how, like the Buddhist picture of how we experience our desires and the placating of our desires is actually how things work. And I think a big counterexample, if you want a concrete counterexample, would be something like, you know, where Nietzsche talks about, have you ever said yes to a single joy? Have you ever had one moment that's made you say, I will take all of the sorrows of my life in exchange for this one moment? It has all been worth it, and I'll take whatever comes, and I'll take whatever has come. In fact, I will even wish for an eternity of that. You know, where do you classify that? That kind of feeling, right? It's not exactly a feeling of a desire being satisfied. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Buddhist way of looking at things, the Schopenhauerian way of looking at desire and craving, would seem to boil all desires down into like their most primitive and coarse forms, right? I'm thirsty, I take a drink of water. The desire is previously sated, or is temporarily sated, but now I will have thirst again in the future, right? I don't think, I think human beings have a lot of desires that don't necessarily work like that. That they're not just like a hunger for some sort of external object that you then get temporarily sated, but then it has to happen again. Like, how do you classify a desire? Like my wife really likes to go skydiving, and she always really wanted to go skydiving, and she's done it. Would she go again? Sure, but she doesn't have a like need to go skydiving all the time now. That she's had this really fun desire that she's satisfied, right? She's done it. She's happy she did it, but she doesn't need to technically do it anymore. And if, you know, it happened again, it'd be cool. But, and there's a lot of things like that where people have like a bucket list. Like, I want to visit all these countries before I die. How do you classify that desire, right? And I know a Schopenhauerian would sort of say, I know a lot of the responses to this, right? Of getting into like happiness as a negative principle. And that, I guess then if you boil it down to that, my real issue is with the formulation of happiness as a negative principle, as the elimination of, or reduction of suffering, because I think there's other forms of happiness beside that. Okay, so then the real Morty said metaphysical. I think he was talking about um, will to power. Physical principle for Nietzsche, maybe. Um, I think it actually, even though Nietzsche is anti-metaphysical, it very well, there are some times when he talks about it in a very metaphysical way. But I don't think you have to accept will to power in a metaphysical way in order for it to be useful. It could just be a psychological principle, a biological principle. You can even accept some of the things Nietzsche says about will to power as like mapping onto Boscovichian uh, force point particle physics, right? But it doesn't have to be metaphysical for you to go that far, even. Do you disagree with any Michael Sugru's interpretation of Nietzsche? I found it very odd in Sugru's lecture on Nietzsche when maybe he's changed his mind since then. And this is like a really basic and kind of uninteresting thing, so maybe you know, it's kind of surface level, but it was the one thing that like stuck out at me and bothered me. Is when he gets to the end of the lecture, he says, "Well, Nietzsche, he's a racist and he's an anti-Semite," and it's like what, dude? Did you? That's like a very ignorant, uninformed, and like I don't know how somebody who's well read Nietzsche could hold, especially the anti-Semite point. Like Nietzsche's philosemitic. You can see it very clearly come through in his writing. And he's like an anti-Semite. So that was very odd. And like calling Nietzsche a racist, like not in any modern sense of the word. I mean, no more than your average person in the 19th century, right? Like they had very different views than we do. And I mean, like the one thing he didn't bring up, the one thing that, to my knowledge, maybe, or to my recollection, he didn't. That Nietzsche was like misogynistic, which is like you have an argument there. He is particularly misogynistic, but I don't think either one of those other accusations wash, and so I don't really know why he said that. And so maybe his views have changed since then. I'd have to look specifically. Remember, because he did one on Nietzsche's attack on Christianity, and he did another lecture on his genealogy of morality. I think both of them were pretty dead on, honestly. Do you personally and then speculatively? Oh, come on. Oh, message retracted. Okay, never mind then. I don't have to answer that. Retracted questions. Get back to playing guitar. Yeah, I'll strum for a little bit more and then answer a couple more questions, and then we'll probably call it. Right. Couple more comments. Okay, wow, I have a lot of questions. Hold on. Would really love to see an in-depth episode on the Greeks. There's gonna be several in a way, because the only way to answer that question is to talk about individual Greeks, right? So coming up, we're gonna have a lot about Diogenes, Thucydides, another episode on Plato. A bunch of cool stuff is coming. Okay, I think that going back, are interpreters like Jacques Derrida and Sarah Kaufman that advocated for a metaphorical reading of him, specifically that women should be read in relation to truth in the oeuvre of his work, rather than literally a woman. I mean, yeah, sure. I think there is. I talk about this in the last episode of season 2, a little bit. There is a definite feminine side to Nietzsche that he has a feminine sub-personality that's pretty strong, and I think it's embodied in Ariadne. I'm sure Derrida talks about that. I haven't really read much Derrida, to be honest. But I think that element's there. The problem is, I think there are some statements that he makes. Like, yeah, okay, you can take like anything Nietzsche says about just women and apply it to a fickle, shallow person, right? But there are some senses in which I don't want to let him off the hook. Like, I think there is some sense in which he was talking about like women. Like, I think all those senses you're talking about are there. I think the misogyny is also there. Okay. Sorry to repeat a question. What would you recommend I say to someone who reacts negatively to I've been learning about Nietzsche? He seems to have an undeserved edgelord reputation. I don't know. Don't say anything to those people. Like, I would just say, if somebody reacts negatively, ask them why. Like, and if they say, well, he's just an edgelord, ask them what book of Nietzsche's that they read that in, or like that they found edgelord material in. Ask them what quote. I know that's kind of like a dick thing. Maybe that's too combative, but you can do it in a polite way. Be like, oh, really? Like, why do you think that? Where did you read that? What has Nietzsche said that would lead you to that position? And oftentimes you're going to find they probably haven't read Nietzsche. They read like articles about Nietzsche or other people talking about him. Don't you think Nietzsche's views on women are more adhering to gender roles? No, because he's very rarely talks about gender roles. Oftentimes he just talks about women as being. It's usually not about roles. It's about personality and like being like weak of mind and ethics and like lacking in virtue. Okay. Thank you. Oh, reminds you of Peter Green. Thank you so much. I love Fleetwood Mac. I really do. Although Lindsay is probably more of an influence on me, like the post Peter Green period. Taking Nietzsche as a literalist on the aspect of misogyny is quite odd when you recognize he's quite appreciative of the feminine prose of genius. Yeah, see, that's the thing. You can't. I don't want to make it come off like I'm just like, oh, Nietzsche was a misogynist. I have to remember that there's like a whole like, social movement of the social justice warriors or whatever the fuck I'm supposed to call them now, who are gonna like take that as like, we've labeled this person as this and now they are dismissed. That's not how I think at all. People are complicated, and I don't morally judge anyone for the beliefs that they had in an earlier time that I wasn't part of. I don't see the usefulness of it. I don't see what I'm getting out of judging history and historical figures based on like modern standards. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm not like saying anything like that. And I think Nietzsche does have this respect or admiration for the feminine and a feminine side of himself as well. But I think he also, for whatever reason, and the other thing that's puzzled me, and I've talked about this in the podcast as well, is that he was apparently a complete gentleman and did not express, like, he wasn't like a raging asshole to the women in his life. He was very like, he had relationships with a lot of women and intellectual women and women who he said, you have great philosophical talent and you should write more, and encourage them. And like people like Helen Zimmern, who went on to like translate Nietzsche's works, you know, said, yeah, I met Nietzsche at the Bayreuth Festival and we went on walks together, and he was a kind and gentle person, and he was nothing but encouraging to me, and he was wonderful to talk to, and he was great in these intimate one-on-one conversations. So, you know, I'm really just talking about the ideas where there are passages where you can't, it's very hard to construe them in any other way. And I don't know. I don't have that many books in front of me. I don't have any to look at right now. So I don't know if I want to get too far into talking about the specifics of that. But I realize that view could be challenged. You think Schopenhauer's philosophy and thinking is still relevant today in regard to how we should think and live our lives? I think Schopenhauer is absolutely relevant, or people should definitely read Schopenhauer in terms of, like, if you want to affirm life, you have to deal with the honest, pessimistic, brutal criticisms of life, and Schopenhauer certainly has that. Suspiria escalating, thank you. Okay. King says indeed. Yes. Okay. Paul Rowe, what is your stance on transhumanism? Do you think Nietzsche would have agreed with the total integration of technology in the human body and the pursuit of the elevation man? I don't think he would have had any problem with like integration of technology. Transhumanism, though, has a very utilitarian aspect to the thought of it, the way it's normally presented in the popular consciousness. We're going to eliminate all the like suffering, all the biological limitations that make us suffer, or make us maybe not physically suffer, but suffer out of want because we can't do or be or have everything that we want. And we're going to make everything as easy as we possibly can for ourselves, make people as safe, as long-lived, as comfortable. And like sort of the ultimate expression of that, like the zenith of that, the apotheosis of it, I think is I just posted a clip where I was talking about it, so it's on my mind because I like cut out that clip. But I was talking about it with an antinatalist, actually, is that Black Mirror episode, San Junipero, where they just upload your consciousness to digital heaven. And I think there's a lot of people who would be all for that and would see that as sort of a transhumanist future in a way. Because what's more transhuman? I mean, some people talk about transhumanism with like cybernetic implants and upgrades and bioengineering. That's a big one. That's going to be a big thing in the future. But what would be more transhumanist than just completely leaving the human body and your mind lives on in a digital form? And in that form, you could conceivably be manifested in any kind of physical shape, have any kind of attributes that you wanted, experience pain or not, experience no pain, live indefinitely, all of these things, right? So that to me is like the ultimate goal of the transhumanist future, and that is something to which Nietzsche would ultimately be opposed, right? And so the real question isn't about integrating ourselves with technology. People have always, I mean, that's like the project of civilization, is using our minds to manipulate our environments in such a way to extract the maximal amount of energy from it that other animals are not able to extract and use in ways that we can because of our, our conscious minds and our intellect. So are you using that integration of technology to make people safer, more comfortable, less tethered to their physical form and to their biology? Or could we conceivably use technology in other ways to make people... see, this is where it gets difficult, because it's like, well, you don't want to make people more fragile. See, that would sort of be the argument, is that by making everything safe, you are making people more fragile. So how do we make people stronger? I mean, it would seem like a ghoulish or like Hellraiser type future if we start trying to maximize human suffering. So that doesn't seem to make much sense to me either, because we also know, I mean, we also know from Nietzsche's study, his genealogy of morality, and his work on ressentiment and resentment in English, that just subjecting people to suffering, by some external power is going to just make them worse. It's not going to make them better. You kind of have to like voluntarily approach and accept suffering in order for it to actually make you better. So I don't know. There are definitely ways that technology could do this. You could say that to the extent somebody uses something like video games to actually, say, improve their like hand-eye coordination or something like that, that's a use of technology that's making you stronger. But if you're the guy who's playing video games 16 hours a day, then obviously that's making you weaker. So I don't know. What else? Nietzsche questions Schopenhauer's pessimism. Nietzsche ever see Christianity as something that brought forth necessary questions for humanity to face? Yes, absolutely. Have I read Ludovici? I've got his translations. I personally have not. Brain to computer is where my mind goes as well. Oh yeah, brain to computer. Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're in the practice room for Destroyer of Light, Monte Luna, and The Flood. Those 3 Austin bands. You're sitting on top of my orange speaker cabinets here. There's another orange stack over there. And that's like a worshiper speaker. I don't know. It's probably all meaningless if you don't know anything about amps or speakers. But yeah, this is an orange rocker Verb 50. Actually, over there, that you can't see it on the case. It's a Music Man. If anyone knows anything about doom metal, our guitarist lent his orange dual dark 50, which is very difficult to find amp now. He lent it to Matt Pike from Sleep and High on Fire, who came through Austin, and he was playing in some other side project called Matt Pike versus the Automaton, I want to say it is. It's a very interesting name. But he, so we know a lot of people who do backline company type stuff. A backline company, they're the people who provide. If you ever go to a music festival and there's a wall of amps and speakers behind stage, they most likely went to a third-party backline company that provided all that. And a lot of the time, these companies will come in, sometimes from out of town, sometimes they're in town, and they have their own stock of amps and speakers, but they also have to procure things because artists will have specific requests. So if you book, Sleep, like when they played at Psycho, California, they wanted like 8 orange full stacks, and the guy who was running the backline company told me, he's like, we rented out all the orange gear in Orange County, California. There's no more of it. So anyway, this orange dual dark is what Matt Pike wanted to play through, and the backline company was like, nobody has this because it's a hard to find amp now, but he knew Steve had one. So he went and got ours, which is pretty cool. Okay, so first I'll say something about Nietzsche and drug use in general. Everything's more complicated with Nietzsche than a simple for or against. Almost everything. But drug use is one of those things because there's, of course, the performative contradiction that Nietzsche was against using narcotics to dull the pain, but Nietzsche also used drugs to deal with his own pain. Now, might we give him a pass because he had a physiological degenerative condition? Yeah, I'll give him a pass for that one. Man was in a lot of pain. But it makes it a little more complicated. But and we could even recognize on another level from that, numbing the pain, like giving yourself a little bit of reprieve from like a constant source or a recurring source of pain so that you can continue to live your life effectively, is quite another thing from just you're otherwise fine, but you put down a 6-pack every day after work, and you're not dealing with any physical pain. You're trying to just deal with the pain of your life. And That's where Nietzsche would have a problem with drug use. It is it's a means of keeping yourself in the same position and not improving or growing out of it. Just simply put. Um, so when it comes to psychedelics, though, people use that in a way that is spiritual, we might say, and not merely recreational. And if you look at that as a tradition, at the Eleusinian Mysteries, they were likely taking something akin to hallucinogenic mushrooms. They drank wine too, but the Greek wine was not um, really going to put you on your ass, right? It was probably just sort of a way of uh, I'm losing the word at the moment, like enhancing the mushrooms a little bit, make you just a little tipsy, so the mushrooms do a little bit more work. But notice at the Eleusinian Mysteries, it's not, they didn't go do this every weekend. This is like a once a year religious festival in which, so what a mystery is, right? People hear about ancient Greek mystery cults. Why are they called mystery cults? Well, because they would perform mystery plays and they would have these mystery ceremonies. What is a mystery? Like, what is this word that's common to all of them? It's, in the most literal, straightforward sense, what it is that there's some sort of like divine truth that's being revealed to you about the mystery, the great mystery, as in the mystery of all reality. That, the ancient religions of the ancient Greeks and even the ancient Romans and ancient Indians, prior to any like formal establishment, and even up, this overlapped with the formal establishment of like a lot of their cosmological beliefs established, in an institutional or doctrinal form. But even as those were being established, in the earliest days of the religion, we really need to understand they didn't have a cosmology the way that like modern religious people do. Or if you ask a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu today, maybe not a Buddhist, like how did the world begin, and what is the purpose of life, and all these things, they'll have like answers for you. And people kind of tend to underestimate how an ancient man, like, they lived in a mystery. The answer was, I don't know, right? I just live to serve the gods around my little family hearth fire, and like all my ancestors are in this tomb. And when I die, what I do know is when I die, my spirit will go to this tomb, and I will live there, with all of my ancestors. But so anyway, the Eleusinian Mysteries were supposed to be like a revelation of those cosmological truths that couldn't be put into a doctrinal form, or man didn't have the words or the metaphysics or any of that yet. So, and it was done in a ritual space. It was done under the auspices of the gods, with offerings and sacrifices to the gods. And so they sacralized the whole process of taking psychedelics and having these experiences. So if you can replicate that, I guess Nietzsche might not have a problem with it. But I also want to say quick like just caveat to all this. Don't live your life based on whether Nietzsche would approve. That's a bad idea. Okay. This is really annoying. I have to like tap on this like this to get it. Okay. Prior to Nietzsche, which philosophers were you reading and really agreed with, but after you're reading Nietzsche, your views shifted? There aren't too many. Bertrand Russell, I guess. I used to think Russell was cool. The thing is, this is like a lifetime ago for me, right? Like I was reading Bertrand Russell when I was like 16 or 17. And then Nietzsche, when I first read him, it didn't actually blow my mind that much. It was because I was going into Nietzsche looking for like fodder for my militant atheism, right? I heard Nietzsche was this cool atheist philosopher. And then I really quickly am like, oh, this is beyond my understanding, basically, right? When I was like 17 years old, my mind just wasn't in the right headspace for it. I picked up the Antichrist, and the first thing he starts talking about, like, about how we're Hyperboreans and all this stuff that I just didn't understand. I was like, what is he talking about? And so it wasn't until later when I read, I remember I read Beyond Good and Evil, and that was like the first one. I was like, okay, wow, this guy's really onto something. And then I read Birth of Tragedy, and he really like got me in the heart there. So, and then it was only after a gradual process of many years of like, once I like read everything Nietzsche wrote, that I was like, this is the guy. I had to basically read it all, and it took a long time for me to get there because, um, you know, uh, there's so many philosophers out there, and it's like this guy wrote like 12 books. Do I want to spend all my time reading just this one guy's books? No, I wanted to read all this other stuff, but no one ever had me coming back like Nietzsche did, and so that's kind of how it happened. I don't think suffering is the fundamental issue. It's challenge. Challenge is what humans need to thrive. That's a good point. I have a Mesa Rectoverb 25 1x12 combo. Got kicked out of my list because it was too loud. So yeah, our bassist was told by the other guitarist, he's like, you'll never have to turn down when you play with this band. And then I've already had to ask him to turn down practice. I'm like, dude, don't tell them you can be as loud as you want to practice. Bass players are the worst. You can't tell them to be as loud as they want. Last question, and then I'll get going. We would do those ceremonies too often to benefit. Oh, okay, it's a comment. Yeah, we would. We would need to... oh, here we have ketamine infusion therapy cured my lifelong depression and anxiety, straight up healed my brain. So yeah, psychedelics. Yeah, I believe that. See, that's the thing. Like, there's valid uses for all these drugs. And it's again, that Nietzschean dichotomy that's very useful for looking at any human endeavor. Almost everything we do, think, all of our motivations, there's so many concepts in our lives that you can approach with Nietzsche's dichotomy, Dionysus versus the crucified. And so in this case, it would be use and abuse. That's the, are you using drugs or are you abusing drugs? And the thing is, we've done everyone a disservice in the United States by suggesting any use is abuse if it's an illicit drug. And that includes things like psychedelics. The government has always held, since I was a child being educated, that it's drug abuse to, for example, take mushrooms. But again, taking mushrooms in the context we just discussed is definitely not drug abuse. That being said, there are people who think psychedelics can't be addictive, or that marijuana can't be addictive, and that's crazy. They just haven't known enough people who have done those drugs. Like, I've known people who have absolutely gotten addicted to all these substances. Are there people who have fully absorbed Nietzsche's memeplex and brought it further? How would a contemporary Nietzsche respond to psychonautics and developments in computer cognitive science? Right. If he could have lived for another 40 years, how would his philosophy have deepened? This may seem like a cop-out, but I don't think I can answer those, honestly. Or like, I don't know. When I think about Nietzsche being brought to our modern times, my brain kind of unravels thinking about, like, there's just too many things that have changed. There's too many technological things that have changed, too many social things that have changed. I think he would see many of the things that he thought confirmed. I think it would go beyond even what he predicted in many ways. And then there would be all these like sort of dangers and opportunities he would see, but it's so complex. I mean, like, those of us now, I don't know what I think about the world now, and I'm living here, right? Just to give some contemporary examples of thinkers, you have people like, I've heard, people like Peter Zehan is out there basically saying the global system's about to collapse, and America is going to be the one country, it'll be rough for everyone, but America is the one country that's going to thrive. And then you have, on the other hand, like people like, who would be like a good example? Like Chris Hedges, he's pretty respectable. He basically thinks we're headed for absolute collapse of the American empire and total ecological collapse. And that this will be absolutely catastrophic and be the end of our way of life, maybe the end of our lives, maybe the end of the whole planet. I don't know which one of them's right. I honestly don't. I have no idea. And I've given up. I think it's funny because we have such this weird, like, trust in academics and intellectuals with their predictions now. I just don't. I've become like an agnostic on predicting the future, and I don't think anybody has any like special claim to know what it is. And so I'm not. I guess that's getting off a little track of you're just what Nietzsche think about right now. But I think the reason why I kind of, I guess, adopted that framework for thinking about it is Nietzsche is very directional in his thinking. He's always thinking about where is this going? What is this transforming into? He doesn't look at things as like we're in this solid, self-contained, coherent state now. What is this moving towards? And it's very difficult to say. And it's so complex and so different from anything he would have experienced. I think he would have been shocked. He would have been awed. Everything. Is there a way to live a free-spirited life without writing a new philosophy, dying in a war, becoming the next Hitler? Yeah, that's what I'm doing, man. How close do you think Jesus is to Nietzsche's ideal? In regards to Jesus bearing the cross, taking the pain voluntarily to such an extent in order to attain God the highest value. That's not how Nietzsche interprets Jesus. If you're interested, I mean, Nietzsche basically interprets Jesus as having like such an incredible sensitivity to suffering, like the suffering of all beings, his psychological, spiritual, existential suffering, that he's like a soul with hypersensitive instincts that can barely stand to be touched at all. And because of this, he rejects the physical world because it is defined by that suffering and promises you the kingdom of God, which is beyond. That Nietzsche basically thinks Jesus's death on the cross is the reason why he bears it with such equanimity, is because for him, this world, his mind is so contrary to this world and its suffering in just Jesus's most basic instincts, that he metaphysically denies the world, and that his death is sort of like a transcendence of that world, insofar as it's like the ultimate expression of his principle of like resist not evil, turn the other cheek, just don't struggle against anything in the world, because struggling is where that suffering comes in. And so it's a very odd and contrarian reading of Jesus. So I don't think Nietzsche would have said he lived up to his ideal. There are some ways in which he respected Jesus, but Nietzsche's overall picture of Jesus is a very negative one, actually. Jesus with Caesar's sword. Yeah. I come not to bring peace, but a sword. Father against son, brother against brother, mother against daughter, sister against cousin, uncle against aunt, first cousin once removed against third cousin twice removed. I forget that. Yeah, Jesus, I don't think goes that far in his quotation, but something along those lines. All right, y'all, I need to get going, but I've had a lot of fun, and thank you all for joining me. Yeah, it's been fun. This is like a fun little thing. I may have played a couple riffs that are like from new releases that I might compel me to like delete or edit this live stream. I'll see if I can download the video and then put up just like the Q&A part. Because yeah. So we'll see what happens. But thank you all for joining me, and I will see you all later. How do I end this?